Hey, everybody. I'm Ben Baby. I cover the Cincinnati Bengals for ESPN. And if you've watched the Bengals through the first couple of games, you've noticed something that you saw a lot of last season. And that's Joe Burrow being on the ground probably a little bit more than definitely the Bengals want to see. If you're a Burrow fantasy manager, that's definitely something you do not want to see. It might be costing you games like it's costing the Bengals games. And before we get in all that, make sure you hit that like button, you subscribe, and let me know what your thoughts are about this Bengals offensive line in the comment section, because that's been the main topic of discussion through the first couple of games. Joe Burrow leads the NFL in the most sacks taken with 13 in the first two. Nobody has really come even close. Jameis Winston with the Saints is the only other one in double digits. And when you look at what the Bengals did last season in getting to the Super Bowl, it was definitely in spite of some protection issues that Burrow faced, especially towards the end of last year. I think anybody who watched the Bengals throughout that playoff run saw him get harassed by Tennessee, saw him get pressured by Kansas City, and definitely in that Super Bowl against the Los Angeles Rams. I think everybody remembers that play at the very end when Joe Burrow maybe had a split second. If he had that split second more, he gets that ball to Jamar Chase for a championship-winning touchdown. Instead, he's under pressure, and Los Angeles wins it all. And so this offseason, the Bengals obviously went out and said, that's the area we need to improve. So they got 3 new offensive linemen in free agency: Ted Karras, their center; Alex Kappa, their right guard; right tackle Lyle Collins; and then rookie Cordell Volson, a 4th-round pick, ended up winning the starting job at left guard. So that's 4 new starters. But unfortunately for the Bengals, that has not yielded the success that they're looking for in terms of pass protection. And so let's get into maybe what is all going on here, because whenever you talk to anybody inside the building, and we've talked to players, we talked to the coaching staff, we've talked to Burrow himself about all of these issues. And it's not as simple as saying, okay, it's the offensive line's fault. And we talked to Zach Taylor, the Bengals head coach, on Monday after the game, and he understands that a narrative is going to form out there. And it is quite unfortunate for that offensive line, because on paper, the offensive line definitely has improved a little bit from last year. When you look at it, last year, they were near the bottom in pass block win rate, which is a metric from ESPN and NFL Next Gen Stats that helps more accurately describe whether an offensive line wins or loses blocks. It's not as simple as, oh, they let up a sack, or they let up they let somebody by. I think there's a more scientific metric, and there's more analytics that go into whether that's good or bad, whether blocking was good or bad, I should say, and probably more precise and something more tangible than what other services might provide. And when you look at that, this year, the Bengals are 25th. So still not in the top half, still not sniffing the top half, but definitely a little bit better. When you look at the pressure rates that we have via ESPN stats and information, they were in the middle of the pack, which is definitely a good sign. Is when you look at, how much Joe Burrow is under duress when he's in the pocket. But whenever anyone wants to talk about that line, and rightfully so, let's go ahead and make this very clear. The 13 sacks are a big issue. Now, if you remember Joe Burrow in the offseason, he did a podcast and he talked about sacks aren't always a bad thing. Sometimes sacks are, a willing risk that you're willing to take. If it's on 3rd down, you're looking for a play, for example, and it's not there, you're holding the ball a little longer, trying to make something happen, and you take a sack. Well, it's either an incompletion or a sack. Either way, that drive is going to be over, and that punt team is coming off the field. Now, in terms of where you're looking at it from the Bengals perspective, you really don't want to have Joe Burrow on the ground taking hits as much as he has been, especially since the end of last offseason, because I think everyone remembers what happened in 2020 when he went down with that season-ending knee injury, and there were a lot of questions about that offensive line, and that continued into 2021. And through the first 2 games, it's continued into 2022. And in the grand scheme of things, the Bengals know they have to be better. We talked to Bengals center Ted Karras, one of those new additions, and he said that the offensive line has to do a better job of making Burrow feel more comfortable in the pocket and making Burrow feel like he can trust the pass protection, which is something that hasn't really occurred yet. And, Karras and offensive coordinator Brian Callahan said that it's not always, maybe the first guy that comes through. Maybe there is something that happens late where Burrow is holding the ball, and then he gets the pressure. It's a secondary pressure, if you will, which may spook Burrow in the pocket. That's something that definitely has to be addressed. And, I think that there's a lot of aspects for this, when you look at why the sack rate is what it is and why Burrow is seemingly under more pressure than he should be, especially when you look at the additions and the offense as a whole. I think there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. This is an offense that struggled in the postseason, has struggled through the first 2 games. And there are a lot of things that everybody can take ownership into why this offense has struggled when it comes to scheme, when it comes to play calling, when it comes to quarterback play himself. Burrow's numbers, even when he's not under pressure, aren't what they were last year. And Burrow himself even took some of the blame for some of those sacks in week 1. He said that several of those sacks were on him. I kind of tried to ask and say what happened. And he said, that was in week 1. We're in week 2. And now the Bengals are going to be on to week 3. So no matter where you want to place the blame, though, whether it's on the offense as a whole, whether it's on the offensive line, whether it's on Burrow, the running backs, whatever part of the offense you see in pass protection, at the end of the day, it's still very clear that pressure rate, the sack rate, all of that has to go down if the Bengals want to be better. And they have to be. Right now, they're sitting at 0-2, the only team in the AFC North without a win yet as they head into week 3. It looks like they're going to play a backup quarterback again in Joe Flacco after facing Cooper Rush, the Cowboys' backup quarterback. And if you're the Bengals and you're sitting at 0-3 after this start, it is a massive hill to climb if you want to get back to not just winning the division, but keeping pace in the AFC, where the Bengals are the reigning champions and they're looking to go back to the Super Bowl. So when you look at it, I think this is going to be a very big week for the Bengals. They're going to need to see that pressure rate go down. They need to see that offense work better. And you want to see those big plays, those explosive plays that you saw in 2021 if you're Cincinnati, which was the main reason why that offense was so good. When you talk about guys like Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, Tyler Boyd, you throw Hayden Hurst in that mix. There are a lot of resources on this offense for this to be very good and to have a high scoring rate. And for those of you playing fantasy football, players that you should feel good about rostering on a week-to-week basis. But right now, it hasn't looked that way. And a large part of that is because of what Burrow has or doesn't have in the pocket. And that's been widely acknowledged through the first 2 games. So when you talk to people inside the building, when we ask Zach Taylor and Brian Callahan and even Burrow himself, I think the message has been very clear. It's Burrow himself said, we've lost 2 games before. There's really no reason to panic. And Zach Taylor believes that this team definitely has the talent on the coaching staff, on the roster, and in general, in order to be better than they've been the last couple of weeks. But we've seen what happened against Pittsburgh. We've seen what happened against Dallas. And now it's up to the Bengals to kind of change that narrative. And they know what it is that can they protect Burrow, not just now, but for the rest of the season. And starting this week in New York, we'll see if that offensive line can continue to get better, build that chemistry, and if this offense can indeed be something that can push the Bengals to being one of the best in the league.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.